Well, I think you're speaking to the discernment around one of the big differences in psychedelic therapy is this concern about how vulnerable people are in a
Yeah,
psychedelic state,
yeah,
and that uh, people who are not well trained to hold that space on behalf of a client, even with really good intentions, can actually do a lot of damage, and that's where the training piece comes in.
Going Inside is a podcast on a mission to help people heal from trauma and reconnect with their authentic self. Join me, trauma therapist John Clarke, for guest interviews, real life therapy sessions, and soothing guided meditations. Whether you're navigating your own trauma, helping others heal from trauma, or simply yearning for a deeper understanding of yourself, Going Inside is your companion on the path to healing and self discovery. Download free guided meditations and apply to work with me one on one at johnclarketherapy.com. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Excited to introduce my guest for today. Dr. Will Vanderveer is a psychiatrist, integrative mental health leader, psychedelic therapy researcher, and host of the Higher Practice podcast. You can learn more about the institute he co-founded at psychiatryinstitute.com. Will, thank you so much for being here. What else should people know about who you are and how you got here?
Thanks, John. Um, it's great to be here. Been looking forward to this conversation. I guess I would say that I came to where I am today mostly from noticing the limitations and how I was trained as a psychiatrist and seeing too many of my patients not do well with the conventional treatments that were out there. Um, so that's how I came into becoming an integrative psychiatrist and getting involved in psychedelic research, and then founding an institute to train people and that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The question I have for you right off the bat is, where do you feel this gap is? Because in my experience, and part of how I got here is leaving graduate school, learning virtually nothing about trauma, what it is or how to treat it. So I had to go learn. And I had
Yeah.
to go get EMDR trained and I had to get IFS trained and all these pieces, right? And kind of go find that elsewhere. Where do you find the gap to be?
Well, I think my experience is very similar to yours. I also went out and got EMDR training. Share a quick story about that. It was kind of a
Yeah.
funny thing that happened. I was a resident in psychiatry in the late '90s, and my wife at the time was a graduate student at Naropa, and through her, I started hearing about EMDR. And inside of my conventional residency training, I was, learning about PTSD in the very conventional way and what the treatments were. And so I asked my training director if it was okay if I went and got training with EMDR, and he said, "Let's not talk about this publicly, but I'm going to support you, and I know a person in the community, another psychiatrist um, who could supervise you with that. We don't have anybody in the department who we could talk to about this, but he really supported me, and I'm very grateful." So that was, like you said, it was an important thing for me to go do, and it helped address some of the trauma. But you mentioned IFS. I'm such a huge fan of the work, and somatic approaches in general can be so much more powerful than what we see as far as FDA approved approaches
Mhm.
to trauma.
Yep.
I think the biggest gap, though, in my on the medical side of training is a gap around understanding what trauma is in the first place.
Yeah.
There's a big focus on what the event was, as opposed to like what's the impact on the nervous system or what's the
Yeah.
pattern there.
Yeah. Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit more because I think you're right. Even just the word trauma often implying the thing that happened, the event that happened, rather than the trauma reaction, which often is the thing that brings people to treatment of going, Something is ruining my life or,
Mm.
driving me to drink or use or feel spacey and dissociated. And I want to get rid of that. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're naming, I think, the essence of it, which is we all have moments, whether we have full-blown PTSD, or we just have what I would call maybe subclinical trauma patterning, or adverse childhood experiences from childhood that leave us prone to overreact to things that we perceive as threat. Our nervous system perceives as a threat. Consciously, we might not label it as a threat, but we're experiencing that overwhelm and that flood and that
Yeah.
um, operating from a place inside of us that we know is not our best effort or our best expression of our best self. And so, folks, I think the difference between subclinical and clinical trauma is kind of a gray area, but I tend to think about it as uh, is the witnessing ego, or the capital S self in IFS terminology, able to hold the witnessing and the perspective, while the dysregulated part of us freaks out? Or are we captured by the part of us that's freaking out um, and lashing out, or withdrawing, or, as you said, numbing, or turning to substances, or and so a big part of the recovery process is cultivating that capacity to hold our experience and not get carried out to sea by our experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that word threat is a big one, or perceived threat, and our nervous system doing what it's designed to do, which is to perceive them,
Yeah.
get out of the way or fight back or whatever. And that threat could be as explicit as, I don't know, getting back with a partner who has physically hurt you, or it could be as implicit as, I have a client where it could be a text from your boss who says, "Hey, we need to talk," you know,
Hmm.
or says,
Right.
"Hey, this spreadsheet isn't right. What happened here?" Right? And that can be
Yeah.
extremely activating around someone is pointing the finger or calling me bad, right? Or I'm in trouble,
Right.
or my
Right.
boss looks and feels a lot like mom, my abusive mom all of a
Yes.
sudden or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and those cues in our current environment um, provoke a reaction, because there is a part of us that had experiences that were very overwhelming to our nervous system, and they registered a memory of a threat. And, as you said, our nervous system is supposed to keep us safe, so it's going to be surveilling our environment for threat all the time. And so this is really the tragedy of trauma, is really literally living in the past, responding to present moment experiences as if the past is what's happening and not the present.
Yeah. Th- I have a lot of feelings about this because it literally risks robbing people of the ability to live their lives. And a lot of times I end up seeing people for treatment who they've already lost a decade running from this thing, or feeling incredibly unsafe on the inside and doing whatever they can to run from it or numb those feelings, or again, drink or use or overwork or whatever it is. And they've just been redlining for 10
Hmm.
years. They also don't know what it feels like to not be redlining. It's like
Right.
getting your glasses prescription updated after 10 years and going, "Oh, I had no idea there was a stop sign there, or that
Yeah.
trees were this green or whatever." It's like, yeah, because all you've known is redlining. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, when I got involved in MDMA-assisted therapy research, in the beginning, I thought this has got to be the worst thing, the worst idea ever. Because I had been trained to think that MDMA was a drug of abuse, that people partied with
Mm.
it, raved with it, caused holes in the brain, and so on. Um, and then I read a paper. This was back in 2012. I read a paper that had been published the year before, where 83% of the folks who went through the protocol that involves MDMA therapy on 3 occasions no longer met criteria for treatment-resistant PTSD. Uh, and that just kind of blew my mind. I mean, anyone who's
Yeah.
a fan of your podcast, who's in practice, is probably just thinking about that number. It's like impossible to think about people with severe PTSD, 83% of them getting well in a 5-month protocol.
Yeah.
Then when I joined the team and we got our study finished in 2018, uh, the number of years that people had been suffering from PTSD in our cohort of people we treated was 29 years of symptoms. coming into the study. And we had 76% of people at the 12-month follow-up no longer meeting criteria for PTSD. So
Unbelievable.
it's quite remarkable, this new tool. Very exciting.
Hey, if you're a therapist, I want to help you deepen your client work, help them get better results without burning yourself out. You can do all this by learning to harness the power of IFS. So I want to tell you, we've got a free IFS resource library that you can download now. This is full of resources like my quick start guide to IFS, the full IFS protocol, a bunch of demos of me doing IFS with real people, and extra self-care practices for therapists. You can get all this for free in the link in the description, and I hope you enjoy. I want to hear a lot more about that. Also, I really appreciate the research piece, just giving us a foundation for the impact of this stuff, right? And cutting through the noise of it. Because on one hand, my sense is that psychedelic assisted work is very in vogue now. It's kind of like arriving. It's also, there's still a lot of friction around it. There's also a lot of like underground work that happens. There's both people doing really good work and also people doing damage, I guess like all things really. I mean, same could be said about CBT for that matter. But I already forgot my question, but maybe you can just keep going.
Well, I think you're speaking to the discernment around one of the big differences in psychedelic therapy is this concern about how vulnerable people are in a psychedelic state.
Yeah.
And that people who are not well trained to hold that space on behalf of a client, even with really good intentions, can actually do a lot of damage. And that's where the training piece comes in.
And I know you guys do a whole lot of that. It's a big part of how you serve folks is training clinicians to do this work with clients, right? Maybe say more about that. Actually, before we go there, what I was wanting to ask is, can you break down more of the current understanding of how MDMA actually helps facilitate the healing process?
Yeah, what I'm going to offer you is my opinion. So there's a lot of theory here, not a whole lot of definitive research. But what we do know is MDMA, through one of the serotonin receptors, has a secondary effect of spiking a hormone called oxytocin. And for folks who aren't familiar with oxytocin, it's the social connection hormone. It's the hormone that is released during breastfeeding, both in the breastfeeding mom and also in the infant, to support connectivity and attachment, healthy attachment.
Mm-hmm.
So what that effect means for someone with PTSD on MDMA is that it dramatically reduces the interpersonal fear that people usually have with trauma. And this allows you to open up with your therapist to such a degree that after the MDMA is worn off, people often will look back and say, wow, I just shared as much with you two strangers as I've ever shared with another human being. And there can be a little bit of a rubber band effect of like, whoa, was that okay? And, obviously you work with that in integration.
Yeah.
So oxytocin is a big part of it. The amygdala, which is one of the big parts of the fight or flight response in the brain, has oxytocin receptors on it that downregulate the fear levels. And this also allows a person to access memories without the thing you commonly see in ordinary states working with trauma is the flooding effect. So people tend to be able to access, you could say in IFS language, the self energy or the capacity to acknowledge that you were there when the thing happened. You were a part of it, but it's not your fault. And so self-compassion really comes online very strong with MDMA, pretty consistently.
Yeah. This is fascinating. So as a therapist, not a psychiatrist, obviously, how does the current understanding around MMA and the mechanism there, MDMA, that's really silly. I'm a huge MMA fan. Not relevant to this show, but I think about it all the time. So there you go. how does that compare to our understanding of, let's say, SSRIs?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the yeah, having prescribed SSRIs for 25 years and having been involved in MDMA research, to me, there's a couple of obvious differences. One is, I mean, on a neuroscience level, the there are about 5 major serotonin receptor families. So SSRIs work on a different family. So there's that part of it. But maybe the more important thing to say is that SSRIs tend to uh, numb or take the edge off of the symptoms of PTSD. Uh, they come with a lot of side effects, and of course, as soon as you stop taking the SSRI, if you're lucky, you don't have withdrawal effects. Um, but universally, the benefit is going to go away um, as you go off of the drug. So, what's really exciting for me as a psychiatrist is to have a model with MDMA therapy where someone only needs maybe one MDMA session, maybe two, maybe three. We were seeing these again very severe treatment-resistant cases of PTSD uh, mostly resolve in 3 sessions. So to have an intervention where the person uses the medication as a catalyst to gain a deeper connection with themselves and recover parts of themselves that have been splintered off, as opposed to using a kind of a blunt tool that just keeps you uh, maybe able to work or able to, not get divorced or so forth. It's very different.
Yeah. I'm so interested in the things we do and the type of medicine we offer that supports natural healing processes that are already like wanting to take place, right? And something I've had other folks come on and talk about various types of psychedelic assisted therapies and how some of them, for instance, people will even just experience their parts or spontaneous unburdenings or kind of do this inner child work without having any framework of like IFS and managers and exiles and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's really just for therapists to understand like what we're trying to do here. But yeah, that came to mind in terms of like what is a natural process of healing in the same way a cut on your arm wants to and will start healing given the right conditions and everything. How do we create that for the psyche?
Totally agree with you. It's quite interesting that the participants in our MDMA trial began to do, so to speak, parts work or IFS work
Yeah,
without having any background, without being, seated with that language
yeah,
during the preparation sessions.
yeah.
It occurs to me, my background in college was I was studying cultural anthropology, and I was really interested in rituals and how people
Mm,
in traditional cultures get well as a community. And I thought it was fascinating that we have rituals that we call mental illness of, you have to cross the threshold 5 times before you can go through, and like OCD kind of rituals. But in a community healing environment in a traditional setting, someone might have to turn around 3 times during the dance to perform the transition ritual of the child being born in the tribe or so forth. So, in the same way, I think that there's something very ancient about parts coming forward inside the mind.
yeah,
And when you, if you look at traditional or maybe you could say universal shamanistic approaches to trauma, to the fragmentation, the soul loss that happens at the impact of a traumatic event, you'll see that the language of recovering um, splintered off parts of the self is actually just very routine. I mean, that's
yeah,
not anything unusual or new, or you don't need to talk to Dick Schwartz about it, and so on.
right,
So
exactly.
it's fascinating to me that some of these medicines um, seem to facilitate access to an inborn architecture of healing or map of healing that can just unfold. And when I said that therapists can do damage who have good intentions, the damage you can do is by interfering with that process when it's already flowing in a beautiful way. And
Yeah.
the better, the more helpful intervention is to sit back and, allow it to unfold rather than
Yeah.
getting involved and interpreting it and talking too much and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. As one of my mentors used to say, don't just do something, sit there. Whatever. I
Yeah,
don't know who
exactly.
coined that, but it goes against a lot of our instincts as therapists, because we
Yeah,
want to do something or be helpful, or parts that
exactly.
want to rescue or save or make sure it's not too much or make sure I'm here with you or whatever. And
Right.
so, yeah, it's like those moments where getting out of the way is the thing to do, right? And even just with IFS alone, I find over time, the more my clients get the hang of it, they will just come in and kind of go inside and drop in and start doing the work. And I'm literally
Yeah.
here, quote, holding space, which is like, okay, what does that mean? And is
Right.
that worth 200 and some dollars an hour or not?
Well, it beats the slower path, right, of some of these older approaches to therapy that, take a lot longer and may not ever get you to where you
Yeah.
need to get to.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
we teach a similar, approach at our institute. It's, the acronym WAIT, WAIT, which means, "Why am I talking?"
Exactly. That's golden. That's golden. Yeah. Yeah. By the time you run through that acronym in your head, the client might have already moved on or unburdened.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I will
Yeah.
tell some of my trainees, something you can do physically is when I'm feeling that energy or that, like, tension, I will literally sit on my hands and
Mm.
just do that and see how that feels, and that can be kind of grounding or at least help me wait a little bit more and
Yeah,
see if I
beautiful.
really need to jump in here. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Or just to see, like, is that my stuff coming in,
exactly.
or does the client really need me? Yeah.
Whose anxiety is it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
I'm gonna throw this out there because, on one hand, the more I do this work, the more things come back to this central word or idea, which is love, and that trauma is, in a nutshell, loss of love and connection. Uh, and healing has to be the antithesis of that, right? Or it's like, Peter Levine talks about the healing vortex, right, versus a
mhm,
trauma vortex. And so I think a lot of what we're doing with IFS is like self is another form of like love and bringing love to parts of you that need it, whether the pissed off
yeah,
drinking parts or the hurt inner child parts. It seems like MDMA helps naturally access more of that love. Or you think about like, I've been, I don't know, like out with friends who are using MDMA or whatever, and there's just like that love, or they're just like extremely loving toward me. Um, but it also doesn't feel fake or completely unwarranted. But how relevant is that while also maintaining our like kind of clinical lens here?
well, I think you're right that, uh, the core of it is love. I totally agree with that, and, I think one of the problems that we're dealing with in human nature, is this problem of the lenses, right? That our lenses, and especially if we're carrying a lot of trauma in our body, our lenses are very distorted. And so the ability for us to perceive the love that's already there, both within and without, is very challenging.
Yeah,
And it's not uncommon to meet people with lifelong PTSD who've never had that experience before, where
yeah,
they experience the world or their environment as supportive or for their success rather than against them always. So the kind of most important part of the work, of course, with psychedelic therapy is to turn what we call a state change into a trait change. You can have a trophy of some kind of like ayahuasca experience or MDMA experience or whatever that doesn't have any legs in terms of changing your character or how you relate to the world and
mhm,
what your daily experience is like. And how hard is it for you to do the health affirming behaviors that we all have to do to maintain every aspect of our health and well
yeah,
being?
yeah,
Uh, so, what happens? inside the session, you know, where let's say a manager part can connect with an exile and protectors can, be more easily facilitated to take a step back and make room for that conversation is the beginning. It's a taste of what's to come or what the possibilities can be. But the session itself doesn't produce the change. It produces the vision of the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like at the end of, or clients that have skeptical parts around IFS, which I very much welcome those parts, all that really matters is, are clients getting better and staying better? Are
Yeah,
they less
yeah,
symptomatic than they were before they started with us, right? And in the
right,
case of your research, right, it's like that's what you're looking at as well. So, same thing if you're doing, working with a psychoanalyst who, after 9 months, gives you this great interpretation. It's like, did that change your life, right?
right,
Do you have less social anxiety now, or is it the
right,
same, or is it worse, right? Or whatever it
right,
is. So I'm very much like I love the more ethereal and like spiritual elements of things like IFS, but also very practical in that people want to get better, and I want them to get better too and have real impact in their life, right? Sometimes, in the case of I mentioned like this client who gets activated with her boss, it's the lack of a trigger that implies that progress, right? And that trigger in
right.
progress. And so noticing that and going, wow, this was the first time where you went in to your boss's office and you didn't get activated. Notice that.
Absolutely.
Right.
Huge.
For the first
Yeah.
time ever, he wasn't your mom, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and these emotional tags or triggers in our current present day environment, can get, I don't wanna say permanently because that doesn't feel accurate, but there
Yeah,
can be very long-term relief
yeah,
from the amplitude of the response in the nervous system to that
yeah,
particular trigger. But if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So it's what you're saying of like, she has to go into the boss's office and have that conversation, to
yeah,
to make the neurons connect in that new formation of
yeah,
like, oh, this is what happens when I
yeah,
go in my boss's office. Yeah.
yeah. Well, luckily, everyday life is full of trailheads, opportunities to get triggered, whether you're like checking Facebook or ordering a sandwich, and the guy is in a bad mood or whatever it is. Right? It's like, or
Totally.
you have a tiff with your partner about loading the dishwasher a certain way, which I still think my way is right, but, it's just like opportunities abound. But also, we go and sometimes clients will go and have these peak experiences, you know, and then come back and wanna tell me about these peak experiences, whether it's with psychedelics or ayahuasca or whatever it might be. And also, number 1, like, there has to be the preparation work. It has to be safe, then the integration work, but
Yeah.
it's also like, can this thing have real impact on your life, and how do we do that? And in my experience, a lot of times people that are doing not so great work around this stuff are, yeah, just not as thorough as they should be around the integration piece, or clients that are truly not ready or not stable or have a combination of medication that doesn't fit well with this stuff. I've seen that as well, where people just go do it and end up in a way worse place. So, but
Sure.
I've also seen clients have the breakthroughs that they have needed, that they've been on the precipice of for months with our work or whatever, you know?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a huge public education piece of work that we need to do. And what I mean by that is uh, psychedelics are sort of in this gray area between a really powerful healing tool on the one hand and a recreational device on the
Yeah,
other hand. And
yeah,
so people, because of that, people tend to underestimate the power of the healing opportunity. And one way to underestimate it is to, you know, take MDMA with friends on a Sunday and then go to work on Monday and not, or even have a psychedelic therapy session on a Monday and go to work on Tuesday. Now, obviously, people have jobs; you have to do what you have to do. But the point is that I think the most powerful transformations occur when the practitioner is helping the client understand that this is a sacred moment that is worthy, and that the individual is worthy of setting aside the time, saving up the FMLA to go to the Ibogaine retreat or whatever the thing is that really protects the time around the
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah, clients really, we do need to push pause on life and go and do that work in a separate kind of container outside of the daily grind of our lives, which, in the case of traditional therapy, it's often this, 50 minutes in the middle of your work day or work week, or
Right.
clients heading right back into a call on Zoom, or, 10 minutes later, whatever it is. So it's like,
Right.
they're only going to disintegrate so much on your couch if they've got a call with the
That's
boss,
right.
that boss we were talking about, in 10 minutes, right? And then
Mhm.
therapists are like, why is my client not opening up, or, going deeper? It's like,
Right.
for very good reason,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
protective reason. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Catch me up a little bit more, and around where are we at, nationally and on a state level with legalization of this stuff, or the FDA, stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're speaking together here in mid-July of 2025, and I'm just putting the time in there because
Yeah.
things are changing so quickly here.
Right.
One, so the short story is that MDMA went through the entire phase 1, 2, and 3 at the FDA and failed to get approved in August of last year. Psilocybin has 2 states that are fully functional in terms of being able to do psilocybin healing work above board, Oregon and Colorado. And psilocybin is in the process of getting finished with the phase 3 study, 2 different organizations, one for profit, one not for profit. And then we have other drugs that are already getting set up for phase 3. LSD for social anxiety, 5-MeO-DMT for treatment-resistant depression, and Ibogaine, of course, a big initiative passed in Texas a few weeks ago, where the state of Texas putting in $50 million. There's a consortium of, I think it's for-profit and non-profit, that are putting in an additional $50 million for research. So the the local scene is very active in different locations. What we're excited about right now, I would say we as in people who are doing a lot of training and research, is that there are changes happening with RFK running HHS in putting the people in place at the FDA to support fast tracking and even potentially reviewing MDMA, looking again at why it was denied. There are some questions about that process and how that went down. And because the efficacy and the safety data was impeccable, there were some questions about the double blind and whether that was effective, and kind of hard
Yeah.
to blind a psychedelic,
Yeah.
it's a whole nother story, but
Yeah.
we're optimistic that because the rhetoric coming from RFK and a couple of people at FDA is very positive, saying that they're prioritizing psychedelic therapy and that they want to push this through in the next 2 years. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it been like for you to see not only the interest rising from clients and practitioners alike, but also some legislation catching up?
Well, it's really exciting, of course. I'm um, hoping that we'll be moving away from state measures into federal legalization. Obviously, access is a huge issue if we only have 2 states that are approved, and
Mhm.
these state programs they're great, but they're also complex and expensive, and they're different state by state. So for someone like me who's training people to be able to provide psilocybin in Oregon and also provide psilocybin in Colorado, the rules in Oregon and Colorado are different enough that, you know, as a trainer, we're having to navigate all of those complexities.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm really hoping that in the next couple of years, we're going to see something federal that can really open things up.
Yeah. Makes sense. We got just a little bit of time left, but let me know a bit more about how you work with practitioners, the process you walk them through to get trained to do this work, and then what do you wish practitioners who are interested in this stuff kind of knew?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So we're currently enrolling for what we call our level 1 psychedelic therapy training, and it's the first level out of 3. So we in our mind, a person can be trained well enough to get started in about a year of training. Um, and we have been running year-long trainings for many years. We've trained a little over 2,000 people in psychedelic therapy. We only work with licensed clinicians as students. There are trainings for people who want to be coaches or other formats. Um, but we also really believe in first starting with information and then also moving into for students that where it's a fit for them to have their own psychedelic experiences. And that doesn't have to be necessarily taking a psychedelic substance. I mean, holotropic breath work and other ways to find into that. But we feel strongly that it's difficult to facilitate someone in a psychedelic state if you haven't had to encounter some of the places that we need to encounter inside of ourselves.
Yeah. I really appreciate that you make that a part of the training. I have a strong belief in that, regardless of whether it's with psychedelic work or anything. Before I ever touched EMDR or used it on a client with a client, I went through it myself. And in fact, I remember when I was getting trained, and I was someone's client for like a demonstration, and it was a student, you know, um, and I used something quite real. Of course, I wanted to be a good client. So I probably used something that was like a 7 out of 10 instead of like a 3
Oh
out
boy.
of 10.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I got completely flooded. She completely stopped in the middle of it, right? I
Oh.
was in a very, very bad place in the middle of basically the worst panic attack of my life and feeling
Mm.
flooded, dissociated, everything. They had to bring the trainer in. It
Mm.
was horrible. It was horrible. It took me probably the rest of the day to come back, right, to feel even somewhat okay. Um, I'm sorry I had to go through that. I'm also really grateful for it because I got to experience the potency of it, right?
Yeah.
And also know this is what happens if you get someone into the thick of their traumatic
Mhm.
reprocessing and you just stop or you slow down. It's like quicksand, right?
Yeah.
And that's what kind of happened. So, that taught me so much, right? And I even offer some of that story to clients in varying degrees, just to let them know I know how intense this is, and I know that there might be both a part of you that really wants to do this and is excited, and also a part that's terrified of like, is this going to hurt, or whatever it is. So
I appreciate you sharing that. That's such a great example of how important it is to undergo what we're providing to other people.
yeah,
Um, that when I talk with people about psychedelic experiences who haven't had them, sometimes the metaphor of a fairy tale or like an environment that has the internal landscape that has beautiful meadows, like Dorothy coming up to the Emerald Castle with the poppies,
yeah,
but it also has really dangerous and scary, dark, like the fire swamp in The Princess Bride or something like that. Like really places that we would never choose to go if we had the
yeah,
choice.
yeah,
And so having this experience inside of ourselves, like you did, of going to a really scary place and then integrating that, coming out of it, um, it, it 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 allows you as a practitioner to trust that people can go to very intense places and come through it and come out the other side, and that you don't have to. Going back to what we were talking about before about whose anxiety is it, right? Like you don't
yeah,
have to over support that person or intervene because you gained that trust in your own experience. And so now you can offer that to the other person.
yeah,
It's very important.
yeah. Yeah, that's great. I'm already feeling like we'll have to have a follow-up conversation because this always happens with these interviews is, 40 minutes in, I now have 100 more questions, and we have our own trailheads here that we could go down. And I just can appreciate that your work is so deep and you've been at it, for a long time doing this work and helping practitioners. And so there's just a real depth to your work that I want to hear more about. But with that being said, anything you feel like was left out of the conversation for today or that you want folks to hear? Yeah.
Well, thanks, John. I'd love to come back and keep going the conversation with you. One thing that's on the horizon is uh, my institute co-founder Keith Kurlander and I have written a book that's coming out in February. It's way too early to talk about, but it could be something that we talk more about if I come back.
Yeah.
Um,
Would love that.
it's written for the person out there who's suffering or who has a family member who's suffering, to help them as a guide to walk through the whole process of how do you interface with psychedelic therapy? What do you need to look out for? How do you pick a practitioner and so on?
That's great.
So you can be on the lookout for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to have you both on, closer to the book launch. We've done that with some other authors, and that's been really neat to talk through that stuff and to promote the book. And I know of Keith just through the grapevine, through
Oh,
therapists and being, someone online. I've just seen him for years in his various pursuits. So yeah, that's
yeah.
neat that you guys work together. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel really fortunate to have a partner like him. We met in a men's group and we've been friends for 15 years, so it works well.
it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess just to wrap us up here, let me know a little bit more about current offerings you have, whether it's for clients or practitioners, and then of course how people can reach out and learn more about your offerings.
Yeah, thanks. So we can be found at the website you mentioned at the beginning, psychiatryinstitute.com. We are offering a number of different trainings that you can find out about. Each one has a different page on the website in the drop-down menu at the top. Some are for therapists, some are for medical providers, some are psychedelic oriented, some are integrative medicine oriented. For example, we're about to launch a counseling course for nurse practitioners and physician's assistants to just learn more about how the body expresses trauma for their medical visits with their patients. So there's a wide range of different things. That's most of what we're doing right now, and trying to finish up this book. So
Good
yeah,
stuff. Well, thanks again so much for being here, for your work and contributions. And we'll put links to everything in the show notes, of course, for folks who are interested in learning more about your work and offerings. And yeah, thanks again. And until next time.
thank you, John. Great to be here.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Going Inside. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and share your favorite episode with a friend. You can follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at John Clarke Therapy, and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarketherapy.com. See you next time.